Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Critica NYC, a show about the lives, work, and politics of the Latinx community in New York City and beyond. My name is Raquel Batista, and I'm your host for this evening. And, as we dive into today's show, I want to just recognize the fact that today is summer solstice. It is officially the first day of summer. And as we are all preparing, I know in my household, we're getting ready for the end of the school year and getting ready to plan, right? A lot of people are still planning what they're going to be doing this summer, especially with our children, trying to figure out whether or not they'll be in summer school, in the Kids Rising program, going into summer camp, and just figuring out what our days for the summer will look like. And so, so much has been happening in the last several weeks, right? Between Jennifer Lopez's documentary on Netflix called Halftime, that just came out as she talks about turning 50 and all of her own challenges growing in a career in Hollywood as an entertainer, to us witnessing, right, the major elections happening in Colombia. We all know, many people, the news has been discussing the Vivir Sabroso hashtag that the left has been promoting to turn out the vote in Colombia, which actually has a very young voting electorate. Many are under the age of 28, and they really turned out to come out and vote. And most notably in this election, for me and for many women of color from Latin America and the Caribbean, we see that the first ever Black woman is elected as vice president of Colombia, Francia Márquez. And so many people are just so excited about this wonderful development that a Black Indigenous woman who has been working her entire lifetime in movements around environmental justice, on reclaiming ancestral lands in Colombia, in working on issues of worker rights, that she has now risen to the leadership of a vice president of Colombia, a very large country, an important country in Latin America, and one alongside Petro, who is now the president-elect. He also is an economist, a former senator, and was very involved within left progressive groups within Colombia, really creating this moment where we see the two of them winning. And I want to specifically create a little space here to recognize the work of a very good friend that I've had the honor of knowing for, I would say, the last 15 years or so, maybe more, Genevieve Williams. Genevieve is the executive director of Afro-Resistance, which is a nonprofit dedicated to working on issues impacting Black women and Black girls in Latin America and the Caribbean and the United States. She's been working on this project for many, many years. And actually, she was the one who introduced me to Francia Márquez many years ago at a gathering in her home in the Bronx. And when I met Francia was very much working on international human rights issues and really, promoting the issues that were impacting her community in Colombia. It's a woman who has confronted death threats, has had her own friends, colleagues who have faced death in Colombia. If any of you know of the issues that are occurring in many parts of Colombia because of the interests of mining and other interests in getting access to natural resources in Colombia, Francia Márquez really came out of that movement. And Genevieve was, really important in terms of introducing her to people here in the United States and her work and us being able to learn of that work. And what's really fantastic about the work that Afro Resistance has been doing is that they organized a delegation to Colombia of Black women and Black girls to go and do election observations in Colombia. So we are very excited, to see that this moment has happened. And now we'll be showing you a short video about the elections in Colombia. And then also we'll show another one about Francia Márquez.
Es historia lo que estamos escribiendo en este momento, una historia nueva para Colombia, para América Latina, para el mundo. Queremos que Colombia, y será la prioridad de la política diplomática, se coloque al frente en el mundo de la lucha contra el cambio climático.
Dije de fiesta a toda Colombia, así que celebramos.
Gustavo Petro y soy su presidente.
Esto es la izquierda que ha llegado definitivamente al poder y que los nadies, el pueblo, las plazas, las calles, está definitivamente hoy con voz y con voto y que tenemos un representante.
Gracias.
So thank you so much for showing us the video. We see excitement happening in Colombia around the election of the first progressive person from the left that will be president and vice president of this country. Now we'll be showing you another short video just so you can get to know a little bit more about Vice President-elect Francia Márquez.
Que hoy haya mujeres negras, hombres negros ocupando, sí, desafiando para ocupar el poder de este país. Que hoy haya mujeres negras, hombres negros ocupando, sí, desafiando para ocupar el poder de este país. Es un acto de justicia racial, es un acto de justicia para con nuestros pueblos afrodescendientes, raizales, palenqueros, para con los pueblos indígenas, que como bien lo dijo el acuerdo de paz, históricamente hemos vivido el racismo estructural, la exclusión, pero también de manera desproporcional los efectos, sí, del conflicto armado.
Ser mujer en Colombia no es lo mismo si tú vives en el Chocó o incluso en el municipio al que has hecho referencia de donde ella es, y tampoco es lo mismo si eres una mujer indígena o si eres una mujer afrodescendiente. Y creo que Francia, digamos, en su historia personal y en sus discursos públicos, ha dejado muy claro que entiende que todas esas distintas variables se conjugan para agravar la desigualdad en ciertos grupos de mujeres, y creo que esa sensibilidad es algo que juega a su favor para el momento en que ella tenga la responsabilidad de llevar adelante políticas públicas para las mujeres.
So as you can see, Francia Márquez and her election is pivotal. It is an important moment in Latin American politics in Colombia. The fact of seeing a Black Indigenous woman voted to vice president, as in our own country here in the United States, right? We're seeing this movement little by little throughout our world, where we're seeing more and more women of color, Indigenous women, BIPOC people being voted into positions of leadership, and how this will translate into changes of policies and programs and budgets. We're hoping that this will really reflect into a positive future for Colombia and also for the Western Hemisphere. We all know very much that the politics of Latin America and the Caribbean impact us here in the United States. Everything from not only the economy, but issues of immigration and migration, and how our nations really, conduct themselves, right? And how business gets done. Everything from oil to the products we use, right? To make paper, to water, all of those things. So this is, definitely an important moment. Again, I wanted to congratulate and thank Afro Resistance and the work of Genevieve and all the women and men that have been working on this issue for so long, for many years, to get to this moment. And really wishing the new Vice President-elect, Francia Márquez, the best of luck as she moves forward into her new leadership position in Colombia. And as we're talking about elections, we all know here in New York, we have our own New York State elections happening. And we are already in the election season. And in voting, we are in early voting, which started June 18th, started this past weekend, and it's going to happen through June 26th. And as a reminder, and many of you know, we have elections for governor, lieutenant governor, state assembly, judges, and other party positions. We have shared here in the past, and we have met some of the candidates for various of these positions, most notably the Latinas who are running for lieutenant governor. And, and as we know, right, here in New York State, becoming lieutenant governor really does matter. We've seen over the years that many issues have come up with past governors have had to resign. And this is how New York State, for example, got its first African-American governor, get its first woman governor, was because the governor had to resign and the lieutenant governor had to step up into the position of governor. So we know that the lieutenant governor position is very important, and really want to encourage everyone to come out and vote for this election. We are still in early voting. And then the last election date is June 28th, which is a Tuesday. Next Tuesday is the last day where you can come out and vote. And as we showed earlier, some rules have changed when it comes to absentee ballots. So due to the recent changes in the law, New York State voters are no longer permitted to cast a ballot on a voting machine if they have requested to vote by absentee ballot. Voters who have requested to vote by absentee ballot can still vote in person using an affidavit ballot at early voting or election day. The affidavit ballot will be kept separate until the election is completed. Election officials will verify whether the voter's absentee ballot has been received. So just to clarify here, so if you requested an absentee ballot and then you decide that you want to go to your poll site to vote, you will request an affidavit. And then once the officials check, right, they're going to double check to see if you had sent in your absentee ballot and whether they should count the absentee or the affidavit. That will happen then once the election is closed and the counting is occurring. So just something to note if you have already requested your absentee ballot, but then decide to go to the poll site. Again, we really want to encourage everyone to come out to vote because as you see, every single election matters. Every single person who comes out to vote really is making a difference, right, in what's happening and how this translates in how policies are made, how budgets are decided, and really impacts our day-to-day lives. So this, moves me to our next big issue. Recently, the New York City budget has been approved. It is a record budget of $101 billion that has been already agreed upon between the mayor and the city council. But something of note is that several council members, many from Brooklyn, actually voted against this budget. And those members are Alexa Aviles, Chi Ossie, Charles Barron, Sandy Nurse, Tiffany Caban, and Kristen Richardson Jordan, all voted against this budget. And many of them notably really voted against this budget because of the allocations that were made. Some council members had an issue with the fact that the New York Police Department got an increase in funding while our schools got a decrease. They got money less for the next school year. And the reasoning around this has been said that because of decreased attendance, there's less students in the New York City public schools, that this decision of decreasing funds to the Department of Education was made. And I would say, myself as a mother, as a New York City resident, as a person that is concerned not only for our safety and public safety in New York City, but also very concerned as to what's happening in our schools, that, I do take a step back in hearing the fact that now there's less funding when our schools already suffer so much with the funding that it does have and all of the needs that it has. And then to be in this position where they don't have the money really necessary to be able to carry out their mission. And especially after having been through this pandemic. And really what we did see is how important schools are. one of the things that I learned, and I think many of us learned, is throughout the pandemic, our schools were really the place where people would go to get food, to seek help. When the vaccines campaign started happening, the schools were pivotal. Pivotal in that process. And so, excuse me, everyone. And so they were just really important in terms of doing that community outreach and touching all the different parts of our city to be able to get vaccinated, to be able to get our city back functioning. And while, I do understand many people throughout our country, not only in New York City, are concerned with, campaigns such as defund the police. The real issue here, and this is, I think, the point that many people, including these council members that decided to vote against this budget, is how are we allocating our resources and how are we really supporting our communities, and what are really our needs are. We know that the New York Police Department has a huge budget, one of the largest budgets in the world for policing, of I believe $11 billion. And, we have to take a step back. Yes, I want to live in a safe city. I want to be able to take the train safely. Like many, I don't want to be, attacked by someone. I want the police close by, and so many issues that the city confronts, right? From everything from our infrastructure and the need to really think about issues like what is going to happen in our city when, we're going through things like climate change, and how it impacts our sewers, our highways, flooding. We have all lived this, we all know this. And so I think that, it is a time for us to really think about what these council members are saying and the message that they are sending us in New York City. And as we continue to think about our future budgets and assistance that we need, what will we be doing? I want to give even a specific example. Everything, right, is personal. My daughter's school here in the Bronx most recently found that there are defects to the actual building. And there's a lot of work that needs to happen, and it's going to impact the classrooms and impact the number of students that are going to be able to be taught in the classrooms. And it's a huge issue that's going to impact the whole student body at the school. And so parents are really concerned about what is going to happen, right? How are they going to get the funds? How are they going to move this along in a way so that we can teach that our children are really learning and are not heavily impacted by these construction issues, or that anybody gets hurt while at the school because there's these huge issues happening with the actual building, the physical building. And so, we have a lot of big issues to be dealing with in New York City. And, I want to first, really give kudos to those council members that decided to vote against this budget. We know that that takes a lot of courage to, say what's on your heart, say what's on your mind, and then bear the brunt of those decisions and how it will impact their own communities and the funding or the lack of funding that will be coming to some of the projects. I know Council Member Tiffany Caban, her local Boys and Girls Club lost funding under this budget. something that is concern to her and to her neighbors and to the young children in that after school program that participate, the Boys and Girls Club. So these are things, that we need to continue keeping an eye on, continue having conversations and debates about, making phone calls to our elected officials, let them know what our priorities are. And this is why it makes every election, whether it's for the city, the state, the federal government, that we continue to participate.
Following an hours-long debate just before midnight Monday, the council passing this city's spending plan for 2023 by a vote of 44-6. Health Committee Chair Lynn Schulman admitting, while not perfect, the budget will help communities thrive as they recover from COVID.
This budget creates a robust pathway to address the way we approach health care, housing, public safety.
In a statement, the mayor proclaimed, in part, this is a get stuff done budget that delivers on key shared priorities. It includes expanding the New York City Earned Income Tax Credit by $250 million to put more money in working families' pockets, boosting the city's reserves to $8.3 billion, the highest level in city history. Adding $3 billion to the labor reserve in anticipation for negotiating labor agreements and adding funds for public safety resources. The fine print includes expanding the summer workforce program, increasing funding for trash basket pickup, and adding more dollars for new homeless shelter beds. A contentious part of the budget, giving $90 million more to the NYPD.
Although we don't see dramatic decreases, one of the biggest things that we did was ensure that we didn't see excessive growth.
City Councilwoman Natasha Williams says it was one of the most transparent budget processes the city has ever had. But backlash began even before it was passed, with people protesting over cuts to the Department of Education, which is losing $600 million. The mayor says it's because of a slowdown of federal pandemic-related aid and loss of student enrollment.
I can 100% say that, and we are really looking at ways to ensure that the schools, especially that have the greatest need, are not underserved in this budget.
And the city council actually got this done early. The city's budget isn't due until July 1st.
So again, thank you so much for all of everyone's hard work around, being able to make these decisions, these really hard decisions, and keep our city moving forward. But, I'd like to also just mention at this point that recently, there has been celebration. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a celebration, but recognition of the fact that DACA, which is a benefit that was won by young undocumented immigrants who stood up and called on President Obama to get them immigration reform. DACA were lovingly called the Dreamers, and to help the Dreamers, young people, young students, to be able to get legal status. So right now we're going to show you a small video about DACA and the work that United We Dream has done, because United We Dream is really one of the most important organizations that really helped to create this movement on the national level. And people like Cristina Jimenez and her husband, Walter Barrientos, and many others were so pivotal in creating that movement to be able to get DACA. I remember the Dreamers that walked from Florida all the way up to Washington, D.C., and garnered national attention on this issue and really became the face of helping to create DACA. So we're just going to show a small video and talk a little bit about it.
I'm Karina. Phoenix, Arizona is my home, and I'm currently protected from deportation by DACA. These are the 10 things I've learned from living with DACA these past 10 years. 1. DACA is temporary, but my home is here. A decade of living from court case to court case and under the threat of deportation is a pain no one should have to experience. 2. DACA is proof that when we organize, we win big. We won DACA thanks to the undocumented youth of color who demanded a stop to the separation of our communities. 3. DACA has been a government band-aid for delivering lasting protections for immigrants. 10 years of DACA marks a decade of attacks and inaction to protect our lives. 4. DACA didn't protect everyone in our community. Black immigrants, especially, are much more likely to be deported due to disproportionate policing and incarceration. 5. Even DACA-eligible youth are in limbo. There are approximately 80,000 new DACA applications that are stalled as a result of Judge Pena's ruling. 6. Our futures are tied together. Just as generations of Black, brown, and queer youth fought for DACA, we must fight for our collective futures and center racial justice at the core of our demands. 7. We're fighting for more than just DACA. It requires all of us fighting for a pathway to citizenship, for abortion care, for LGBTQ+ rights, for the end of police brutality, and the abolishment of ICE and CBP to ensure communities thrive. 8. There's overwhelming support for permanent protections. 80% of Americans back permanent legal status for undocumented immigrants. 9. We need citizenship for all. We live with the guilt of seeing our undocumented family and friends excluded from protections. We need immigration reform now. 10. We can only do this together. Join us to take action now by texting 10 years to 877-877.
Yes, and this immigration debate, while it has not been the hot issue in the news, still remains to be a challenge for our communities, for Latino communities throughout the United States, for all those who are journeying to get to the United States, whether through the southern border or being able to come in through family members. This issue still remains to be a huge one. You know, and I myself, I started working on immigrant rights issues early on in my career in the early 2000s. And here we are in 2022, and we still have not seen any immigration reform, any meaningful immigration reform to legalize those that are here and really creating a system that really takes into consideration families and how this impacts families for generations, right? We know, especially many of our viewers know, sometimes it can take 10, 15, for countries, 20 years or more to be able to reunite with their loved ones here in the United States. And we still remain this issue being one that hasn't been able to be addressed in this country. You know, it's really tough, right? I think especially for our congressional members who are progressive, right? Like people like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Congressman Jamal Bowman and others who have been really working towards creating systems that really understand the dignity and respect that needs to be held for communities. And I don't know, I don't pretend at this moment that I have any particular answers, you know, on this issue. We've had so many moments, right, particularly over the last 20 years, where you would think that we would have really addressed this issue and could have, right? When President Obama came to office, I was a young executive director at a nonprofit in Washington Heights, working on helping to address these issues, right? Everything from detention and deportation issues to really creating a path towards citizenship. And even at that moment where so many of us were so hopeful because we had voted for the first Black president of the United States ever in its history, that it would not be an issue front and center. And I'll never forget how the young people of United We Dream and many other organizations, and how many people within the immigrant rights movement really came behind and supported our young people, the dreamers, to be able to pass DACA and to get it on the table. Look, like in many movements in the beginning, it's always tough. There's always a lot of pushback. People will tell you that it can't be done, that it won't be done. But, they did it, right? These young people took the mantle and said, no, we need to get some reform that will allow us to live and thrive in the United States. And they were able to get it. Now, when they got DACA, as mentioned in the video, there were a lot of challenges to that too, especially under the Trump administration, where, they tried to end the program. And luckily, they were able to continue this program, keep it going, and so that it could continue to benefit thousands and millions of young people in this country. But the reality is that is not enough. And so much more needs to be happening in order for us to support not only young people, but all of the undocumented people that we have currently residing in this country, who work, who pay taxes, who are raising children, who are raising US citizen children, who have US citizen grandchildren, who continue to support us in so many ways, like in the pandemic, who really stepped up, delivered our food, helped to care for our elderly, do so many things in our country. And I think it is only right, our moral right, the right thing for us to do at some point. So we shall see how things shake out after the midterm elections, how Congress will look. Many of us have been looking and watching the January 6th committee hearings that have been happening on the Hill in Washington, D.C. And we've been learning a lot of things around what people in power, congressional members, their role and how they participated in the insurrection and the attack on Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And there's a lot of conversation right now around what's going to happen after these hearings and what role will Attorney General Merrick Garland play, and will he prosecute? Will he prosecute the people who planned, who participated, who were a part of this movement, in terms of really impacting our democracy? And I think, as we talk about this show, Critica NYC, and all the issues that we've been talking about here, right, from what's been happening in Colombia and the Vivir Sabroso campaign, to our elections here in New York State, to the budget, right? All of this is what's the most important part, is that we are and must withhold a democratic process, a process where people can participate, can voice their thoughts, their opinions, without the fear of reprisal, without the fear of being attacked or harassed or getting death threats, and that we are able to move the business of the people forward, right? And that will be the challenge for Colombia. That is the challenge for us here in New York State and for our country. There's been a lot of conversations too with this issue of voting and voting rights and who gets to vote and who gets to participate, and the issue of the security of our ballot. We just mentioned earlier this issue of the changing of the absentee ballot and and how those votes get counted, right? And this is all of these things, are just so important to our to how we live our day-to-day lives, to how we have the ability to thrive. And I think for Latinos specifically, we must take even more a step forward to really pay attention to what's happening, to really learn, and to really take an active participation in the decisions that are being made and how it impacts our lives. So what we'll do right now, I'm just going to move it towards, we're going to show video on the abortion issue.
Most notably come the constitutional right to privacy, the right of an individual to make decisions about their life, about their family, about their body, without government interference. And so there's a lot at stake in the outcome of this decision. And for that reason, I've asked these experts to be here to talk with me about how we might best prepare the American people for the consequences of what this decision will be in terms of their life and the choices that they are able to make and have a right to make. Overturning Roe could clear the way for challenges to other fundamental rights, including the right to use contraception and same-sex marriage. And so I'm going to talk with these folks about that, and I think it's a very important point to make that many of the states that have passed trigger ban laws are also the states that are passing laws to restrict trans rights, gay rights, and the freedom to vote. And when you look at a diagram of just a Venn diagram in that regard, it tells a real tale of the ideological perspective that some of these state legislatures have in terms of these various rights that folks have been given as part of what we believe are inherent rights under the principles and the ideals and the values that we hold dear.
Another hot button issue being closely watched in Washington and beyond, a Supreme Court ruling on abortion that could come as early as this morning. NBC's chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins us. Peter, first, when might that decision come down, and what can we expect when it does?
Yeah, Hoda, you're right. It could come any day, with the court expected to overturn Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to an abortion. Now, if that happens, 13 states, Texas, Tennessee among them, already have what they call trigger laws that would immediately ban abortions. Other states, like California, have been preparing to serve as safe havens of sorts for abortion rights, offering support and legal services to women who travel from out of state for an abortion. Hoda.
So yes, so here we continue with the abortion issue. We're still waiting, right? We're still waiting to get the official decision from the Supreme Court. But we know already how women throughout this country are already being impacted by their own state laws. In Texas, there are women who are finding it challenging to be able to get an abortion. One story I recently read was about a woman who had twins. And she found out that she was pregnant literally 48 hours before the abortion laws restricting the ability of a woman to get an abortion in Texas went into effect. And now she has twins. And we know that in many of these states, especially these southern states, it's very difficult for people to be able to find assistance, financial assistance, help, being able to get access to even just healthcare generally, to then find themselves in this predicament. And so, as we've discussed on Critica NYC, over the last year, really, ever since we saw the movements happening, even in the Dominican Republic, where women and men were coming together, calling on what they call the las tres casuales, which are the three exceptions, right? And we know that the United States has had the tradition of having a very open, right, abortion law where the limit was really if a woman was, once she reached like the 6 month mark, whether or not her ability to get an abortion, but it was not as restrictive as only looking at these three exceptions, right? That's the other extreme of being able to have access to an abortion, right? And so, I think that as women, especially as Latina women, and our men, right? Because, everyone who is in the business of who can potentially reproduce should be paying attention to this issue, should really care, right, about whether or not a woman or a person who's having a child can have access to really making the decision that's going to impact the rest of their lives, but not only their life, the life of others, right? Not only the child that you could potentially have, but even the lives of the people around you, and it is a very, very, very personal choice. It is a very difficult choice to make. I know people who have had to make this choice. They don't take it lightly, right? And it is something that people carry with them for many for the rest of their lives. But again, this is something that is hugely personal. This is why we have free will, but I won't get into that debate specifically at this point. But we do know that in this country, that the right and the religious have in the past supported the right to an abortion. There's this wonderful film that was made by Eva Longoria. It's a documentary where it's explored this how the right to an abortion evolved and then devolved, right? And then how it became then a hugely political issue for the right to be able to win. And one thing that I noticed, and this is the one of the good things, one of the very few good things about social media, is I was taking a look at, how on Facebook you have the ability to look at memories. And right around the time when this issue was dropped, that there would be these changes by the Supreme Court. Right around this time, also like 3 and 5 years ago, this same issue came up with the abortion issue. It became a real national issue in the media. And many people said, yeah, this really is kind of like a trick, right? Something that the right will bring up during election to be able to win their midterm seats. And so while this is still something that is very real and something that can occur, it's something that we need to pay attention to. And I keep repeating this whole notion of paying attention, this whole notion of really looking at, how these things happen, how there are patterns, how these things are cyclical, that they continue to come up, and why do they continue to come up? And really, this is why, our being able to have shows like Critica and have organizations that are continuing to engage our public, engage the Latino community around having these conversations and really dissecting, how this is impacting us from our perspective, how this is impacting us, right? The same thing can be said, we've had our co-host Lucia Gomez have had a ton of shows around this issue of redistricting and really looking at how do these districts get created and how do they look like if when our communities, when Latinx communities are the ones really taking the lead and looking at how our communities are being drawn up, how they're going to be potentially represented. So I feel like, yes, this show is really a compilation of of all of the things that we've been discussing over the last several months. Right here we are, we're at the summer solstice, preparing to, hopefully many of us taking a little time off, taking a little vacation. I'm gonna have a little sip of water right now. Taking a little time out to hopefully rest and relax and being able to, think about, right, what we need to be doing next, right? We're going to be going into, this is like, we're halfway through the year. We're going into the last 6 months, the last half of 2022. And what kind of mark do we want to leave during these next 6 months? What are we going to do in terms of who we're voting for, who we're going to turn out for, who we're making sure who are in leadership and in power to be able to really advance the issues impacting our community. And so I just want to take these last few minutes, just to really thank everyone who has been such a critical part of Critica NYC, and not only, of course, the wonderful team that we have at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network and our fearless leader, Zenaida Mendez, our executive producer, and Carla Robles, who has been just so helpful in putting these shows together and putting our graphics together, and just helping me and Lucia in getting live to you. And Freddy Pinto, of course, who has been there also since day one, and all the others that have been just so important to this show. And, the Manhattan Neighborhood Network, all of it, right? The whole idea around creating public access, these platforms for us to be able to have these conversations with you, the public, with the Latino community, and all the other communities, right? Who are interested in really creating the dialogue and really creating a dignified and respectable community and society in order for us to live in. But also I want to take a chance to thank all the people who have also really been, supportive of me, and that includes my parents, Juan and Sonia Batista. I want to make sure I give them a big thank you because they have really helped me in creating the space and the time for me to be able to do this. And this has been really a labor of love, something that I do, from my heart, and to be able to share, my own thoughts and feelings about what has been happening, in our communities. And also, of course, I'm going to thank my daughter, Carmen. Carmen has been really great, especially the last several shows, in helping me, in her being in her space and my being in mine when we have to do the show. And so I really want to thank her for, her supporting her mom in, doing the things that we love. Because really, we are the ones that serve as examples for our children, for what is possible, for what we can be doing, for how life can really be something, sabroso, right? So, the message of Colombia, vivir sabroso. And, I hope that, I was watching many of the reactions of people around the elections in Colombia. And one of the ones that actually really also impressed me was watching Ana Maria Archila, who is one of the candidates for lieutenant governor. She's Colombian and lives in Queens. And her talking about us viviendo sabroso en Colombia y en Nueva York. And so I really took that as a cue, right, of what can we be doing to, really improve our lives, make them better, so that we can have access, right, access to affordable housing, access to good quality education, access to public safety. I care about public safety, and I want to have safe streets. Access to healthcare, access to all of the things that will just help us thrive at the end, right? Many of us are surviving. Inflation has not helped us. Inflation, the prices of everything are going up, and wages don't necessarily go up with the prices of food, of rent, of gas. And so, as we're all confronting all of these issues that are impacting us, do we just all need to take that moment to reflect and to see how can we ourselves become leaders within our community, right? Whether you decide to say you want to go out, become a member of your community board, become a member of a local organization, run for political office. These are all great and wonderful possibilities. So again, I want to thank everyone for taking time to watch Critica NYC. Would love to hear from all of you. Please feel free to contact us at critica.nyc@gmail.com. We also have our Instagram and Facebook, which is critica.nyc on both. And please leave us your comments. We would love to hear your feedback, recommendations on future shows in the upcoming fall. Soon you'll be watching Lucia Gomez as well. Again, thank you and have a good night.